Barney Miller is an American sitcom set in a New York City Police Department station in Greenwich Village. The series originally was broadcast from January 23rd of 1975 to May 20th of 1982. It was created by Danny Arnold and Theodore Flicker. Captain Barney Miller, played by Hal Linden, tries to keep from going crazy while leading the 12th Precinct's detectives. The near-retirement Jewish-American Philip Fish, played by Abe Vigoda. The gung-ho, good-hearted Polish-American Stanley Wojo, played by Max Gale. The ambitious, intellectual, arrogant African-American detective Ron Harris, played by Ron Glass. The philosophical, wisecracking gambler Japanese-American Nick Umana, played by Jack Sue, and a Puerto Rican named Chano. Miller also has to deal with his old-school superior, Deputy Inspector Frank Luger, played by James Gregory, and uninformed Officer Carl Levitt, who passive-aggressively badgers Miller constantly about being promoted to detective. Chano is replaced by the intellectual Arthur Dietrich, played by Steve Landsberg, from the third season on. The show's focus was split basically between the detectives' interactions with each other and with the suspects and witnesses that they detained, processed, and interviewed. A lot of the typical conflicts and long-running plot lines include Miller's frustration with red tape and paperwork, and also his constant efforts to maintain peace and order and discipline in the police setting. The show takes place almost entirely within the confines of the detective's squad room and Captain Barney Miller's adjoining office in the fictional 12th Precinct. A typical episode would feature the detectives bringing in several complainants or suspects into the squad room. Almost always there are 2 or 3 separate subplots in a given episode, with different crimes affecting different officers. Very seldom, but about once a year, one or more of the detectives would be outside the confines of the walls of the office, either on a stakeout or at their homes. The original pilot had, with the exception of Linden and Vigoda, an entirely different cast, playing characters that were discontinued in the continuing series. When the pilot was picked up for its first 13-episode run on ABC, the show was completely recast almost, and different characters were added to it. Original actor Val Basoglio, who played Sergeant Grimaldi, was expected to transition into the new cast, but was ultimately not offered to continue his role on the regular series. ABC found out that he once appeared in a pornographic film, and they didn't want to be associated with this and taint the series or the network if this information came out. He was replaced with Jack Sue's character of Nick Umana. Sue and the producer, Danny Arnold, were well-established friends, and both of these characters, Grimaldi and Umana, occupied the same desk on the set. In a highly unusual departure from a conventional television series, the show was deliberately staged as a theatrical play, using only one set, which included the squad room, the office, and rarely the restroom. Out of 170 total episodes in the show, all but 13 are filmed exclusively at ABC Television Center at the Barney Miller set. The original pilot was titled The Life and Times of Captain Barney Miller, but it was completely rejected by ABC. It aired as a special on August 22nd, 1974. ABC was at the time negotiating a deal with director John Rich because of his overwhelming success with the sitcom All in the Family. Rich had seen the pilot and was interested in working on the show. He went to ABC to try to get them to give the show another chance, and strictly because of him, they picked it up for a 13-episode commitment. But due to disagreements with the producer and writer Danny Arnold, Rich ended up leaving the show after 2 episodes to work on other projects for ABC. When Harris, played by Ron Glass, is asked to produce a porn film for an undercover sting operation that they are working on, he uses the name Starry Night Productions as his cover. Years later, the show writer Reinhold Weege used this name for his own production company when he produced Night Court in 1984. The character of Levitt, played by Ron Carey, wanted something that would be his trademark. Every time he left the squad room, he opens the door with his left hand, with his back to the edge of the door, rotates around the edge of the door, thereby keeping his back against it, and then closes the door. This was his signature move. 2 of the props that were used on the show in the police station set were the chalkboard, which was the daily duty roster, used to show whether the policemen were on duty or off duty, and the cell door. When the show ended, the chalkboard and the cell door were donated to the Smithsonian Television Museum. The producers were approached about doing a feature film based on the show using the regular cast members. This never came about. It was just never able to be put together. This show was terribly liked by real policemen and detectives. During its broadcast run, amid all the cop shows that were on television, many real-life police officers considered this television show the best depiction of the realities of police life and what they do on a daily basis. And one of the early publicity things that they touted in the show was that it was a cop show without violence. No serious violence ever took place on camera. This is something that was terribly different from all the other shows that were on television at the time. Initially, Hal Linden and the series stars, who most of them were New York actors, had originally insisted on the show being done in New York rather than Hollywood. ABC wasn't having any of this. The series producers didn't like the idea either. So all the actors got shot down on this notion of shooting everything in New York. Now, the show was notorious for its marathon taping sessions. Early sessions were done before a live studio audience, and they used a laugh track to sweeten the reactions, and this was all done in post-production. Danny Arnold would then rewrite and restage entire scenes after the audience departed. A taping session that began in the afternoon or early evening would then continue on into the early morning hours. Jack Sue got really sick and started losing weight and eventually went to the doctor, and it was found that he had esophageal cancer. He was absent for several episodes due to the cancer, but then he returned for a short time, looking terribly frail and not like himself. He wasn't able to continue working for very long, and he ended up dying at age 61 from this cancer. His final appearance on the show was an episode called The Vandal in Season 5, Episode 9. He passed away on January 11, 1979. But in 1979, shortly after this, an episode of the show called Barney Miller, Jack Sue, A Retrospective was done with the actors out of character as a tribute to this great actor. The episode consisted of unscripted reminiscings of Sue by the cast members, interdispersed with clips from the show. At the end of this episode, the cast raised their coffee cups as a salute to him. And this was a reference to a running joke throughout the series that he made a very foul-tasting cup of coffee. This series took a while to become a smash hit, but ABC continued to support it. What a well-done and funny show. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.